Hello everyone, Pennywhistle here. So, MTGO is still down, we're still waiting for Pioneer, so instead of my first video being gameplay, let's go with a land review instead. I don't have every single land available in Pioneer. I've got everything up to Throne of Eldraine as well, if you're watching this in the future. But anyway, I've split it into three major sections. We've got mono-coloured lands, multicoloured lands, and utility. So, let's start with the basics. Literally, let's start with the basics. We have basic lands. Every deck is going to play some amount of them. Why? Well, they come into play untapped at no cost. They're also very good with check lands, as well as the new throne lands. Now, I'm combining both the castles and the non-basic basics in this list. The common cycle of lands are pretty much unplayable outside of mono-coloured decks because they take three basic lands, or well, three basic land types, in order to come into play untapped and to have their effect. And on top of that, we don't have fetch lands for them. However, the castles, they could be really good. They only need one of the corresponding basic land types to come into play untapped, and they're also not legendary. I think in general you're going to have a reason not to be playing four of these in a mono-coloured deck to start with. Then finally, for the mono-coloured lands, there's the desert cycles. Now there's a couple of mono-coloured desert cycles. The first ones, the common ones that cycle for 2 mana, they come into play tapped, they're too slow. The Ramunap Ruins cycle, however, of the deserts that tap for colourless or for the appropriate colour of mana that are for 1 life, they may have a use. Probably not going to be in every mono-coloured deck because of the life loss. However, Ramunap Ruins was banned in Standard. Maybe it's good enough for this format. Next we move on to multicoloured lands. Now the only cards banned in this format are the fetches. Do we have other fetches available? Yes. Are they any good? No. We have cards like Evolving Wilds or the new Fable Passage. They only fetch basics. They can't fetch things like Shocklands or the new Throne lands. The closest thing I would say to a playable fetch land is Field of Ruin, and that's not entirely because it's a fetch land. So the top tier jewels of the format are thus probably going to be the Shockland cycle. There's all 10 of the colour pairs available, they enter untapped when you need to, and they have the basic land types. I think in this format, even more so than Modern, the basic land types are going to matter a significant amount. Mostly because I think the next best cycle of dual lands are the check lands. We get all 10 of these between Ixalan and Dominaria. They're painless and they come into play untapped conditionally, but that condition is easily met with enough basic lands and enough shock lands. Or even the basic land typed lands from Throne of Eldraine. I think in 2 and 3 colour decks you're going to be seeing a significant number of these, probably almost as many as the shock lands, I think. Now next I'm going to be throwing some cycles of cards together. Now for this I'm going to throw together the Pained lands, the Fast lands and the Man lands of the format. The reason I'm throwing all of these together, well there's 2 reasons actually. One is they're kind of I think a tier below. In a 2 colour deck you'll probably play some amount of some of these. They all have different utility between coming to play untapped with the Pain lands but costing life, or the Fast lands coming to play untapped at the beginning of the game, and the Man lands turning into creatures to kill people, or to block. The reason I've thrown these together most of all though is because we only have the enemy colour pairings. These lands are all very playable, but I think because so many of these cycles are only in the enemy colours, perhaps we'll see a tendency towards enemy coloured decks. Although I think between the check and shock lands, that's not necessarily going to be the case. Now, what the allied coloured decks get instead is the battle land cycle. They have the basic land typing, however without fetch lands, I think their condition to enter play untapped, having 2 basic lands, is too much. I don't think they're going to be even good, let alone as omnipresent as they are in the Frontier format. Now if 2 colours aren't enough, we also have the 5 Khans of Tarkir tri-lands, as well as Knights getting their own tri-land in Tournament Grounds as well. I think Tournament Grounds is really the only playable one out of them. Control decks might end up running 1 of the tri-lands if it is in all 3 of their colours, but I think that's going to be the limit of their play. Finally, we have Rainbow lands, lands that make any colour of mana. We have Mana Confluence. I think that's the only one that's going to be playable in any deck, because it comes into play untapped and it doesn't have any cost beyond the 1 life each turn. Now that cost is significant in some matchups, not necessarily in, for example, control matchups or combo matchups. Aether Hub is another land I think that will be played significantly, however only in decks that can produce enough energy. Otherwise there are some 5 colour lands, but their use will be very limited. For example, Haven of the Spirit Dragon will be very good if you are playing a Dragon's deck, otherwise it's going to be garbage. Now I'm going to list some losers, some runners-up for the multicoloured lands. We have the Temples, we have all 10 of them. They're going to be the best comes into play tapped dual lands that are available. That Scry is a powerful effect. For those on a budget, we have all 10 gain lands from Khans of Tarkir. We have the Guild Gates for decks that care about gates. And then we also have things like the Cycling Jewels from Amonkhet and the Reveal lands from Shadows over Innistrad, which I just don't think have a place in the format. Finally, I wanted to give some examples of utility lands. Lands that aren't only there for the mana, for their effects as well. A lot of these are colourless, not all of them to be fair though. Now the Ixalan transform lands are in here, because they're kind of a land, they're kind of not. Typically they're only as good as their unflipped side is. See for example Search of Azcanta is probably the best example. I would say if their spell side isn't useful, it's too big of a cost to be playing the land side. Otherwise we have Arch of Orazca to provide card draw in late game situations. Blast Zone is an uncounterable but slow answer to almost anything, notably not tokens. Detection Tower removes hexproof from things. Field of the Dead just got banned in Standard. Is it good enough in this format? There's a lot more ramp spells. However, Field of Ruins is also in this format. Perhaps that is a good enough answer to Field of the Dead for it to not be a force in the format. Inventor's Fair will be very good in artifact-heavy decks. Maze's End is back. In a format with Scapeshift legal in it, please make that deck. I'm not brave enough to do it. I want to see it work, please. Mutavault fits into pretty much any deck that can handle the fact that it makes colourless mana. Nykthos makes Devotion decks go big. Sanctum of Ugin for when one Ulamog isn't enough. Scavenger Grounds can sacrifice itself to uncounterably exile a graveyard. And Urbog does Urbog things. We know what Urbog does. So that's my opinion of 145 different Pioneer legal lands. I hope this video has been informative, and if it has been, then please consider liking, commenting and subscribing. Thank you for watching, this has been Pennywhistle, and as soon as MTGO comes back up, I'll be filming a Pioneer gameplay video. I'll see you soon!